Hey, welcome to another video. Today I've got something a little bit different for you. We've got the Super Saiyan Gold, Super Saiyan Gogeta, as well as some paints, the DF head sculpts, and basically what I'm going to do is try and customize this guy. For a lot of you, the Broly movie version of Gogeta would be your absolute favorite, something you absolutely love. You dig the yellow and the light blue. But for me personally, Movie 12 Gogeta is where it's at, with the orange parts around his armor, the darker blue belt. So that's what I'm going to do. I've picked up a Mr. Color Orange. I feel like this is the closest I can find that looks good. As well as the blue, I think that should work well. And then, since the head part is the harder part, I just picked up the Gogeta custom headset from Demonical Fit. So if you don't really care about the process and just want to check out the final version, you can skip to the end. Though it would be nice if you do watch throughout the whole video and you can see me trying different techniques and trying to go through and customize this. So if you want to do it yourself, you can use this video as a guide, learn from my mistakes, and yeah, should be good. Let's get into it. Okay, so before we actually dig and start painting, we've got some prep to do first. So I've actually got a nice big bowl of hot water here. It's not boiling, but it's pretty hot, so I can put my finger in there, it's okay. Not sure what the ideal temperature is, but I feel like this should be fine. So what we're going to be doing is just putting in the parts into the water. Gogeta's just going to take a nice little wee bubble bath, soak in there. Actually might need to put him flat down with his little wee rubber ducky. So while Gogeta is just in here relaxing, I'm just going to quickly go over the steps we're going to be taking. So obviously first up is soaking to loosen him up so we can actually dismantle him as much as possible. And we're going to pop off his shoulder parts, and ideally we're going to pop apart his waist. Okay, and then after that, what we're going to do, we've got a spoon here, we're going to test out the paints. We've got the orange and the blue. And we're just going to use the primer to put down a base coat, paint over with the colours, and we'll confirm that the colours are correct and that the finish looks nice. To go along with the finish, we've got a top coat, we've got a gloss and a matte. Not sure which one we'll use in the final version, but we'll test out both and compare. For the masking for the parts that we can't actually remove from the physical body, we're going to use the Tamiya masking tape. I'll also test this out on the spoon just to make sure it's going to do the job that we require. So he's been in there for a few seconds. Let's take him out, drain him off, and we should be able to pop some joints apart, I hope. Take out the head as well. Okay, so we've got Gogeta here just strip drying on a handy towel. Before we get into him, we're just going to edit the head a little bit. This is the Gogeta one. Often the Demonical Fit heads, the part where the ball joint goes in is a little bit tight, so I've soaked it as well, and I've got a toothpick. Just going to push in the hole and just kind of wiggle it around and hopefully just stretch out that plastic a little bit. And once it cools down, it should maintain the stretch size, at least more than what it was originally. And this will hopefully allow you to put it on the head easier. If not, you might just have to repeat this later, but for now, that should do. Okay, so now we're going to try and take off some of these parts. The shoulder should be easy. Yeah, look at that, it popped off, no issues. 1, 2. Should probably keep these in the order that we take them off. Okay, next is, do we want to pop the arms off? Let's see if these come off easy. Don't want to pull too hard, so let's go for waist. Before we pull, I'm just going to jiggle it around a bit. And then grab on. Oh, damn, that was easy. Nice, there we go. Got his legs, got his torso, and his belt. Perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to go dry this guy out, and then we'll get ready for the test painting. Okay, so I'm back with the spoon after the primer test. I had it sitting for about 15-20 minutes and I just put the air dryer on it. Ideally, I believe with primer you want to let it sit for at least 24 hours before painting over, But since this is a test, I figured the air dryer will do, and we should be able to get a good look. So I'm just going to pop off the one layer of tape, and yeah, not sure if you can see it well, but that's got a very crisp, clean line with no running, so that's good. I'll leave this other tape on for when we brush over, and then see how it looks after that. So before we can get into actually painting, we need to check out the colours and see the consistency. We might need to use some thinner if it's a bit hard to brush. So I think what we'll do, we'll start with the orange first and then see how this goes. So I'm just going to put some paint into these little trays. I do have like these tiny pipette things just to take out the thinner for a bit more accuracy. So yeah, I think this orange looks really nice. So let's put some in here. So I'm just going to test the paint as is first. So put a little bit of a brush. I'll do some on the inner. So I think normally you need to do a couple of coats. I think they said 2 to 3 if brushing. Just do orange down. Try and keep it nice and even. And when we're doing the test, we'll go to the back side of a spoon and apply some without the primer. Let's try and keep it even without lines. Okay, that looks pretty good. So what I'll do now is add some thinner to this paint and then compare the consistency and how well it flows. I believe you don't need much of this. So we should use a little wee pipette. Maybe start with 1 or 2 drops. 2 drops. Mix. Oh, that's really runny. I'll do 1 line next to the masking tape. And some more down the handle. I do feel like this does actually brush on a lot nicer. I'll be interested to see what the final result looks like. Okay, so that's the orange done. What I'll do, I'll go clean the brush and switch over to the blue. So the first test is going to be with the paint as is, and then after that we'll go through and add a little bit of thinner and see how it compares. So let's start on the primed side. The paint definitely feels like it's gripping a little bit, so I really feel the primer is, the thinner is the best option to go for. But let's check it out now. Just put a little bit in like before, probably 1 drop since there's less paint. So I believe the official site for Mr. Color Paint says if you're using a brush, probably looking at least 2 coats. So now that we've got these both blue and orange there, I'll let them sit for maybe 15-20 minutes and then just put the hair dryer on them just to thoroughly dry them out so we can apply a second coat. Okay, so the first coat's all dry now. I'm about to apply the second coat, but before I do that, I just want to quickly go over the results. Especially on the back side, I believe the non-thinner for the orange looks really good. For the blue, the effect is essentially the same, so just putting a very tiny amount of paint thinner seems to be the way to go. I think this paint just brushes on nicely anyway, so just adding a little bit just makes it a bit smoother. For the orange side, when I first used the thinner, it was a bit bubbly. It Could be partly because I used too much thinner, or just due to the brushing technique, so I'll be a bit more careful this time around with the second coat. Okay, so I've just finished the second coat of the orange on the spoon, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to take one of the shoulder parts and actually apply some of orange paint to the inside of this directly, and that way we can see how it looks once it has dried and can confirm if we need a primer or not. Okay, so I've popped the sash part off his belt, and what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to use some of the blue paint just on the inside area here that you normally can't see, and that way I can see what the texture is like once it dries. One of the issues with this part is that it's actually kind of a rubber material. I'm not really sure how well the paint is going to apply to it. For this part, might actually really need to use the primer, unfortunately. But for now, let's just put a coat of blue over top and see how it dries. Let's do that one little bit top part, that way when it's attached to the belt, even if it turns out bad, you can't actually see it. Okay, so while we wait for the test paints to dry, I'm going to take this time to mask up around the legs of Gogeta and as well around his neck, just with the masking tape, and see how this goes. Okay, so this is the first leg done. I'm actually just using the toothpick here just to try and push the masking tape inside underneath and try and cover that area. Thankfully the part inside here, you can't really see it when you're looking at the figure normally. However, just trying to get the tape in there now will hopefully avoid any extra splashes or run of paint when we do come in to do this area. That's worth spending a little bit extra time now, just playing around trying to get this as neat as possible, and it should make the finishing touches a lot easier. Okay, now on to the next leg. Okay, so I think both these legs look pretty good. Good thing is, when we're painting these, we can actually use a nice thin brush and just go in there, and we should be able to avoid the edges as much as possible. So I believe this should be a good enough job. And next job is the neck collar. Okay, so let's go and mask this up. Okay, so the masking around the top of his collar looks pretty good. Let's just double checking with the brush, see if it can fit in underneath the seams. And I believe it should be fine. Might get a little bit of extra paint on the inner skin underneath the neck joint, but if I do, it should be covered. Otherwise, once everything's all set, I'll be able to come in with a little bit of paint thinner and just slowly remove that. It should be able to come off easily. So I'm not too worried about that now. The next step, now that we've got everything masked up, is going to be painting. Okay, so now that all the test painting's done, looking at the inside of the crescent shoulder piece, the orange actually looks pretty good. It's only still got the one coat, so it's still a bit thin, but I believe once you get a second coat in there, it will look really good. And same with the blue, the base blue just straight onto the teal colour actually looks really good. It seems to have stuck on really well, and I believe once you do paint it, it should look good and it shouldn't come off too easily. So everything's masked up. And the next step before we actually get into it is just to make sure that the masking has stopped the paint from leaking. So I'm just going to peel this off now and see what it looks like. Oh damn, yeah, that worked really well. Nice crisp straight lines. So yeah, using the masking tape all around the areas should protect the rest of the figure. So yeah, it looks really good. And yeah, the blue is looking nice, and especially the orange on the back of the spoon here looks really good. On top of the primer, it would definitely need a lot more coats, probably at least another 1 or 2 more coats to look really good. So yeah, I'm just going to wing it without the primer, and hopefully it will turn out really well. So yeah, I'll get the first coat on now. So right now I'm just touching in the inside, being very careful not to hit the ball joint, because if you get the paint in between the plastic and the ball joint, it might get stuck. So be careful. Don't need to go all the way in, since it is mostly covered by the boots. But yeah, so that's all the blue parts done. Still need to do the inner part of the belt, but this is a bit hard at the moment, and the other side of the sash. But once those are dry, I can actually touch them. I'll be able to go through and touch them up, and once everything's dry, we'll be able to go through and do the second coat for everything. They recommend at least about 24 hours maybe before you go through and do a second coat. So what I'll probably do, just leave these until the morning. They'll give them a good maybe 12 hours, and I can go through and give them a second coat, let them dry again throughout the day, and then in the evening I should be able to go through and do the top coat, and that'll be it. So far so good, no major problems. Let's hope the rest of the customization goes well. So via the magic of editing, the second coat has been applied, it's dried. It's had a couple of hours now, and it's looking really good. The orange and blue, I believe the colour pigmentation is pretty much spot on. And yeah, so the next step is going to be masking the rest of the body, so we can apply the top coat. Now, we had the matte and gloss. So while I was waiting for this to dry, I went and tested the matte on the spoon. So on the inside here, there's no top coat applied, whereas on the reverse, there is a top coat, and you'll notice straight away the difference that makes to the paint. It's definitely a lot smoother, and it's just got rid of that sheen on there. Now, since the figure itself doesn't have any glossy parts, and the shoulder part was originally matte, I'm actually going to stick with the matte coat, because I feel like it's definitely going to be the best finish for this figure. So before we can get onto that, we need to mask the rest of the figure, especially around the legs and the body, since we don't want to apply any of the top coat onto those areas. Now, I could go through and use some masking tape to wrap around, but that might take a bit too long. So I thought what might be a good little wee cheat way of doing it is just using some Glad wrap. So I'm going to get some of this, just wrap around the body, and make sure there's no exposed areas. Okay, so the masking of the body and legs is done. The glad wrap did a really good job of speeding up the process. Did just use some masking tape around the neck joint just because it's a bit more of a harder area to access, and then just went around with the tape just to make sure everything's sealed up. So now on to top coating. Okay, so the top coat has been applied. I stopped after 2 coats because I felt like the effect that was left was working really well. Just got a little bit of a shine there. And after that dried, I peeled off all the masking tape to reveal the results. And overall, it's really good. On the neck piece, there's a couple of parts of it back here, which I'm just going to probably use the toothpick just to slightly pick away. And then for paint missing, there's a little tiny bit here and on the inside. So what I will do, I will just get the small paintbrush with a little bit of orange and just slowly touch it up. Thankfully the areas that aren't really seen, but it'll be nice just to kind of get a little bit of orange in there, so there's no strong contrast. For the legs, the colours came out really well. On the very ridges, the paint didn't stick quite as well. There's probably a issue due to not using a primer. However, I do like the contrast that it gave. It's hard to tell via the camera, but there is a little bit of a nicer contrast compared to before, where the inside the slits of the cloth is darker compared to the other parts in some locations. So it gets a little bit of a shading effect, which I think is quite nice. And before I put the top coat on, I realized the joints inside here were actually exposed. So I just got blue tack and just covered it around the joint so the top coat wouldn't get in there and cause any issues with the movement. So yeah, so the next step is just to tidy up around a little bit of a paint around the side of the neck and then touch up the parts which are visible. Okay, so I've just used this very fine brush to put tiny amount of paint just in the little spots that was in and around the neck that was still showing yellow, and same with the outside, and that should make it blend in a lot better. And at least I say general glance when looking from the sides of it. The one part that is a little bit annoying is on the inside there, just where the paint was a bit thick when I first applied it. It got stuck onto the masking tape, so there's a little bit bigger section there, and then on the back as well, around here where the masking tape was on, it's just leaked a little bit. It's not too much, but I'm not really sure of the best way to clean that up. I might try a little bit more with the toothpick, just trying to etch away at that paint if I can. Otherwise, there's one or two little black holes I might just touch with paint, so at least it's a smooth transition around. Okay, so I've gone through with the toothpick a bit more on the orange part around the back. It's a little bit tidier. I've also got the orange paint again, just touch up one or two small parts just to make it a bit of a smoother overlap. And for the first time, overall I'm pretty happy with the result of the neck. I think next time what I'll do is actually use the small brush from the start and just do the thin layer of orange around the base on either side, and then go through with the bigger brush to fill in the bulk of the colour, and then only mask up for doing the top coat. I think they'll probably give a better result. For the blue pants, there's one or two parts in underneath that's missing paint, so I'm just going to touch it up now with a small brush, and there's one overrun of blue paint here and one on this side as well. Fortunately, those are covered in probably 80% of the views. Tried using the toothpick just to pick off the paint, but it's a little bit too thick and set, unfortunately. Might be able to get in there with a little bit of a thinner and dilute it a bit more. But for now, we'll go in with a small brush and just touch up the areas that are missing a little bit more paint. Okay, so now for the fun stuff, reassembling him now that we've got everything painted. I've already attached the ribbon on the belt already. There's a little bit peg on the inside that just pops out, it's nice and easy. And also on the inside of the belt it says F with an arrow up, so I assume F is for front and the arrow for the direction that needs to go, so that makes it very easy to work out how to reassemble. So yeah, let's start with the legs and waist, I guess. Alright, check him out. Damn, he looks good. So the customization is basically all complete now. The orange and blue is looking really good. The belt is still a bit shiny, and same for shoulder pads 1 or 2 parts. So I must have missed it with the top coat. So later on, when I get time, I'll go through and touch that up. But for the time being, I'm just happy with the way he's looking now. So yeah, thank you very much for everyone watching this video all the way through. I hope you enjoyed watching a complete novice give customization a try, and hopefully you're inspired as well to go out and make your own Movie 12 Gogeta. If you do want to give it a shot, I'll put a link to the paints and thinners and brushes, etc., the stuff that I use in the description below, so yeah, just check that out. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, let me know in the comments below what you think, if you reckon the results look good, who your favourite Gogeta is, the original or the Blue Imposter. Yeah, also, yeah, hit that like button, subscribe button, keep an eye out for future videos. Cool, thank you.